Theresa May, of course, asked about the special relationship between the UK and the US. Is it still in place?
Yes. I mean, I think one of the most important things to bear in mind was that we had this whole controversy after the, when Obama came over. He said that if Brexit happened, then Britain would go to the back of the queue. But of course, Donald Trump has been he made a very big point about the fact that wouldn't be the case. So in the face of it, it's not necessarily bad news for Theresa May that Trump won this election.
Yes, so we're no longer at the back of the queue. Where does it put us on a sort of post-Brexit basis? In the most simplistic way, is a Trump win good for Brexiteers or good for the Remain camp?
Well, certainly you can make the case if you look at, for example, the dynamics of the Brexit negotiations. So this is, if you're taking sort of a 2-year view, Theresa May is going to have to make lots of different deals with lots of different countries. And you could make the case that if Trump does carry through on his sort of threat to be maybe a little bit to be cozy up to Russia to a certain extent, you're going to see countries in Eastern Europe maybe perhaps a lot more prepared or happy to do deals with the UK in return for security guarantees, in return for the guarantee that the NATO umbrella will be sort of very clearly placed over countries like the Baltics and Poland, etc. So Theresa May has an opportunity here perhaps to play the security concern in Eastern Europe to her advantage when she's horse trading on Brexit.
I want to bring in Ian Wishart in Brussels. Ian, we had some comments from Jean-Claude Juncker today after the results were out, and they weren't particularly warm.
No, I mean, across Europe, really, there's been a sort of a lukewarm message of congratulations because they know they're going to have to deal with this man. They might not like him. They may see him as a bit of a threat to the established order of things, but they know he's going to be the man in charge. So they're not going to come out straight away and say, we don't want to have anything to do with you. But at the same time, they do realise that there's this momentum growing that we saw with Brexit against the EU, against the things that the EU stands up for. Its liberal democracy, its social security system, its free trade deals, and I think they see Trump as a real threat to that. So, they've come out today saying, we're going to do business with you. We want the transatlantic alliance to continue, but we feel a bit wary about where this might take us.
Well, there's the whole question of NATO, of course, as well, and the idea that now there's really no safety net. This idea that people are being voted out of office because electorates are unhappy could continue to spread. And of course, Italy is up next with a referendum. So what do you think EU leaders are thinking right now?
Should I talk directly? I should look at you when you talk.
That's right. I mean, you've got the Italian referendum in March. You've got in December, rather. You've got the Dutch election in March, and then elections in France and Germany. So they know that this time next year they could all be gone. So they see that sort of populist momentum in the US, and they're really worried that there could be some kind of contagion to Europe. And you talk about NATO. I mean, the Danish Prime Minister has already come out today and said this shows we've got to start spending more on defence. So in all sorts of ways, in all sorts of different countries, the Trump effect is already having quite an impact, really.
Let's bring in Tony Halpin in Moscow. Tony, Vladimir Putin's presence was acutely felt throughout the presidential campaign in many ways. He was the first to congratulate Trump today. What sort of ties can we now expect between the US and Russia, or more particularly between Trump and Putin?
Well, Mark, in Moscow, in contrast to Brussels, there was barely disguised glee at the outcome of the election. And the reason's very simple. Russia believes that under President Trump, they can forge a much warmer relationship with the US than has been the case under Obama, and that will help Russia get out of the dead end it's in relation to sanctions over Ukraine and its annexation of Crimea, and allow it to forge a partnership with the US in Syria, where it says it's been fighting Islamic State, and the US under Obama has been accusing Russia basically of propping up the Assad regime. So there's terrific optimism in Moscow that this is a new era, a new chapter of Russian-American relations.
On the Ukraine issue, Tony, I mean, I've got a chart here showing the Ukraine 29 Eurobond yields shooting up today by the most in 9 months. I mean, is it a valid concern that Donald Trump will be less willing than Obama to protect Ukraine from Russian aggression?
Yes, I think the yields were up more than 80 basis points today, and the reason for that is that many people do believe that Ukraine is now more vulnerable than under President Trump than it was and is under President Obama. Mr. Trump has said on the campaign trail that he would consider recognizing Russia's annexation of Crimea, and that could lead to the lifting of US sanctions against Russia over this. In fact, one of Mr. Putin's economic aides today said as much as that they expected Mr. Trump to lift sanctions on this issue. And there's also the concern, obviously, about the ongoing conflict in eastern Ukraine and whether a Trump administration is less willing than the Obama administration to apply pressure on Russia to withdraw its influence over that conflict and to reach some kind of settlement. So I think Ukraine is very much concerned that it will be more vulnerable and that this could lead to, in extremis, an increase in the fighting in eastern Ukraine.